I've trimmed out a few slides to help get us back on time, and I'll probably skip over a few, so I'll give you that heads up as we go. But I want to maybe talk a little philosophical with you about efficiency, and I think, Kim, your point of, we've got some on-farm places where we've got emissions, okay? And there's probably not a lot we can do directly to select for decreased methane emission. But what we can do is make sure we do a better job of creating output for whatever methane we do produce, okay? Because as you'll see in a little bit, we've got a energy sink, a set of maintenance costs associated with our cow herd that we need to be very cognizant of. And to the effect that we can change that input-output relationship, we actually affect sustainability. Okay, fair enough? Is that a legitimate argument? Okay. So I want to take us through that a little bit. I do want to give credit to two documents that have been particularly influential in my thinking on sort of this issue and a number of others. The first one is not a new one. And it's a little hard to come by. I happen to have a digital copy if anybody wants to read this. It's a very interesting read. It's a little bit long, but it's from the Beef Cow Efficiency Forum, May 29th, 30th, 1984 in East Lansing, Michigan, May 31, June 1st, 1984, CSU in Fort Collins. And the topic was really at a time focused on improving cow-calf efficiency, okay? And talked a lot about systems kinds of concepts and ones that are very, very important to our business, maybe more important today than they were in 1984. Okay. The other one, that didn't come out at all like it was supposed to. This is a recently released white paper. Merlin Nielsen is in the audience, was the lead on this particular white paper, commissioned by the Beef Improvement Federation. And it's titled Lifecycle, Total Industry Genetic Improvement of Feed Efficiency in Beef Cattle, Blueprint for the Beef Improvement Federation. Sort of a contemporary response to our needs for improvement in feed efficiency, but taking a broader view than maybe what we've traditionally done in terms of individual animal feed conversion or feed efficiency, okay? So this one's actually available. It's part of the proceedings from the BIF meeting. It is up on bifconference.com, something I'd encourage you to read and spend a little time with. It's not near as long as the previous one. It has some really good concepts in it, I think, that are beneficial to us. As Kim suggests, over time we've become more efficient. One of the arguments I have with my non-beef people that I associate with occasionally is that we live in a carbon-based economy. And so in any commodity that uses carbon inputs, over time, to stay as a participant in that business, you have to become more efficient, right? Which leads to us to believe that as the beef industry, we've done over time, we've increased output with a smaller cow herd, smaller land mass used to support that cow herd. We've likely become more efficient using carbon, and I think Kim now has some good data that supports that over time. Okay. One of the key things that I think is really important for us to keep focus on is we have different measurements of efficiency that are not only different and have differing importance across individual producers, but certainly across different sectors in the beef value chain. Okay, so feed efficiency, for example, is a measurement that measures how much feed it takes to get to some particular endpoint. Well, your perspective on how important feed efficiency is of a growing animal may be substantially different if you're a feedlot producer than if you're a cow-calf producer, okay? And we'll talk about some of those in a minute. Metabolic efficiency, certainly how animals use consumed nutrients to support metabolic function, primarily as it relates to maintenance requirement of those animals, say of different size and lactation potentials. And then production efficiency, okay? So the first two, largely individual animal focused. Production efficiency likely speaks to more of a systems concept. How does an individual set of animals perform and interact on a cow-calf operation to achieve some desired outcome, Okay? A broader perspective of inputs and outputs. And then ultimately economic efficiency. How do producers and participants in our beef value chain stay sustainable? I think profit is a key component to that sustainability. As producers and managers of a land resource, at the end of the day, economic efficiency is what determines, do we get to stay the managers of those resources? Okay? So some differing concepts of efficiency, and I think it's a little naive of us once in a while to get focused in on any one of those because they're all important at the end of the day. Okay? Components of efficiency, as we think about individual animals, we can think about maintenance efficiency and maintenance requirements, certainly genetic and environmental components associated with those, depending on if you live in South Texas or in North Dakota. Okay? Differences in energy production or energy requirements for those production systems. Production efficiency. As we think about maybe efficiency of growth and how do we deposit different bodily tissues in animals in terms of lean and adipose tissue, lean and fat, as we think about fetal growth, all of those sort of things have an opportunity to have differing levels of efficiency, albeit many of them probably very difficult to measure and maybe very difficult to improve. If we think about the bottom one in terms of cow efficiency, how does a particular animal of a biological type interact with its production environment to achieve reproduction and an ultimate calf that moves into later segments of the value chain? Certainly one, as a cow-calf extension guy, I'm pretty interested in, but one that sometimes I think we lose focus on in our business. We get really sort of in-product focused and forget that if the guy at the back end of the chain can't raise calves and be profitable at that, we're never going to get cattle to the other end of the system. Okay? So we have to have some balance in our perspective. No doubt individual animal feed efficiency is really important, and really important economically in our system as we experience elevated costs associated with feed. You all have seen these numbers before, really, really big impacts by changing efficiency in our system as it relates to feed. The good news is a number of those feed efficiency traits have genetic components to them and heritabilities that are in the moderate region. If we look at average daily gain, which has historically been used as one of our metrics to change feed efficiency or relative feed efficiency, heritability about 0.26, dry matter intake, heritability about 0.4, residual feed intake 0.5, gain to feed ratio about 0.27. And I think one of the important things to recognize here is that the off-diagonal elements here represent the genetic correlations between those traits. Okay? And maybe one of the easiest ones and maybe most important ones for us to conceptualize is the association between the genetic association between dry matter intake and average daily gain. Okay? There's an old feeder's adage, intake drives gain. If you go look at a pen of cattle, you can predict gain principally by looking how much feed they consumed, right? What we want to do ultimately is start to separate this genetic association. Okay? We want to have animals perform equal or better, but do it on less feed. In fact, I see Dr. Nielsen nodding his head. He's a co-author on a very nice paper looking at different methods of selection for improved efficiency. And at the end of the day, the one that has the biggest economic impact in a positive fashion is one that drives intake down and performance up. Okay? Important for us to do. In some ways, this is corollary to calving ease and birth weight, right? Okay? Have we made substantial impacts in changing performance in terms of weaning weight, yearling weight, etc., and simultaneously increase calving ease? Heck yeah, we've got a great story to tell on that from a genetic improvement standpoint. We've largely done that by starting to separate the association between calving ease and birth weight. Okay? One of the things I think is really interesting as you go back through the literature is that many of the ideas that we're struggling with today aren't new. Okay? And many of them were summarized and outlined and developed by Gordon Dickerson in the 1970s, and some of them even earlier than the 70s. But one of the ones I like the best is this Lifecycle energy intake per pound or kilogram of edible product relationship across meat animal species. Okay? To really highlight both a challenge and opportunity for us as beef producers. Okay? If you look at these different color codings, this is replacements, dam maintenance, gestation, lactation, progeny maintenance, protein, and fat. And they're ordered, this is fat, this one's replacements. Okay? And if you look across the monogastrics, of course, maintenance requirements of dams and replacement costs because of their litter bearing and shorter gestation is dramatically less than our business. Okay? Beef is here, the replacement costs and dam maintenance account for greater than 50% of the caloric requirement of our business for every kilogram of product we produce. Okay? Yet where is almost all of our focus? Okay? And I'm part of, I see Jerry nodding a little bit, I'm part of a project that's looking at the efficiency of growing animals, which I think is a really important component as we understand the metabolic and physiological and genetic underpinnings of efficiency. But at some point we've got to broaden our perspective. And we've got activities in that project that look at that in terms of associations between feedlot cattle and other animals in the production chain. But we've got a huge target right here in terms of how do we control and minimize maintenance costs and replacement costs in our business, okay? And this part is the part that I think speaks directly to Kim's sustainability issue, okay? This is the overhead we pay for every pound of beef we produce, okay? If we can do a better job of increasing reproductive rate or managing death losses through BRD, all of those sort of things that affect the number of animals and their composition when it comes to endpoint helps improve, I think, profitability, but certainly sustainability from an environmental perspective. So my challenge to us is let's not get too far sidetracked from targeting things that can have substantial impacts. And not all of these are super hard to do, okay? My big yellow thing here is that efficiency of growth in cows is not the target, right? We think about cows, we want them to get to some weight, stop, and then we just pay maintenance on them every year, okay? The target is maintenance efficiency and maintenance requirement and how that interacts with our production environment to manifest itself into changes in reproductive rate, et cetera, okay? So I think one of our biggest challenges as an industry is that we need to change our thinking, and this isn't a novel Weber thought by any stretch of the imagination, okay? We need to change our thinking from individual animal performance to system performance to get our arms around this, okay? If we continue measuring individual animals, we never get at the broader issues of its impact on reproductive rate, conception, longevity, all of those sort of things. We never collect that data. We're focused on individual animals that make it from birth to harvest. You've missed a big chunk of the data, okay? The other thing I think we need to focus on, obviously, is profits versus outputs or inputs. I mean, we're historic output measurers, abysmal input measurers, and abysmal profit measurers, okay? And, that's one out there, three this way, okay? So it's not to chastise you all, it's to challenge you, okay? Premiums a profit do not make, from the famous philosopher Yoda, okay? The younger people get that, okay? If you don't know who Yoda is, catch me over a drink and I'll explain that bit. The point here is that we spend all kinds of time talking about how much extra our calves brought at the sale barn or how much premium we got on the rail as pride points, which isn't bad, but it distracts us from the real pride point is how much money did we make, okay? And there's more than one way to skin a cat in our business, and Allison, I'm going to steal your little diagram that has the little pyramids that are breeds, and I'm going to change that to channels of beef production, right? There's different ways to be profitable in our business. We don't all have to raise the same thing. We don't have to meet all the same consumer targets because there's more than one consumer target for our product, okay? Revenue is not a great predictor of profit, okay? Any of you guys that run your family business know. If you just look at how much gross revenue you produce and pay taxes off of that, that's not a very good, it's revenue minus cost, that defines profit, okay? We've got lots of metrics we can talk about for defining efficiency of cow herds. I won't spend much time on them. I think the further you drive down this list in terms of incorporating economic information into your decision stream and how that impacts economic efficiency in your operation, the better off you'll be. And one of the things that we've just got to wrestle with in our business, and for the seed stock producers in the audience, I don't mean this is, and I'm hopeful it's not offensive, but we've got to get our perspective around changes in performance relative to individual animals for growth rate, viewed independently of the interaction that produces in terms of the maternal components of our cow herds. Okay? And it's illustrated exactly here. Say this is average calf weight. We know that there's a positive association between the mature weight of our cows and the calf weights or the calf weaning weights that they produce. Okay? We've increased cow weight about 300 pounds over the last 30 years. We've seen increases in phenotypic weaning weight as well. There's a positive association here. But what do we know about the association between mature cow weight, though, and pounds of calf weaned per cow exposed in efficiency measure? Are those lines parallel or not? They're not, right? They intersect. Okay, so there's an optimization problem here between what is the optimum weight of our cows, the optimal weaning weight of calves relative to this efficiency measure. Okay? One of my big concerns in our business is you look at the genetic trend in every major U.S. beef breed for growth traits, what direction is it? It's up and at a pretty good clip. Okay? In my view, there's a day of reckoning in terms of how big our cows can be relative to our production environment that's due to that associated response and selection. Okay? And almost none of us, notice I didn't say you, almost none of us do anything about selection for mature weight of beef cows. Okay? We haven't put our hand on that and said we're not going to increase that. We just kind of let it ride over time. And commercial producers have inherited that. Their selection strategies have resulted in this large increase as well. Okay? I like this quote from the famous Steve Radakovich, made in 1984, pulled right out of this publication. Efficiency has to be viewed from an operational standpoint and not from a per cow or per steer basis. Okay? So we can get in the same conundrum if we think about individual cows relative to efficiency. That's not a systems view. That's an individual animal view. Okay? So we've got to keep pushing our vision out to take into that system view. One of the ways I like to do that is look at beef life cycle feed efficiency, an idea put forward by Dickerson that looks at an equation like this, and there's a number of others that get more progressively complex. This, I think, is one of the simpler ones, and it illustrates a very important component, and that is, noticed here in bold, number of progeny, which is a reflection of the reproductive rate and survival of those calves produced in a particular scenario. And I like these kind of representations because that's my timer that most of my time is, or self-allotted time is expired. I haven't gone over yet, Spangler, not yet. That was the early warning. Yeah. So, efficiency, we gain to feed to gain, all those things are ratios. Well, those are nice little numbers that we kick around, but when you get down to actually making improvement in a system, those aren't very useful because they abstract a lot of underlying data. And so I like these linear forms that describe efficiency as differences. So this is dam weight times the lean value of the dams plus the number of progeny times their weight times the lean value of the progeny to describe the revenue component of this production system relative to the costs associated with it. And this is primarily defined in terms of feed. And if you follow through Dickerson's work, what you find is he starts breaking out these components of feed into partitioned components for maintenance, production, waste, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? But this kind of thinking helps us isolate both, I think, where costs are, but where opportunities are for improvement. Okay? And to me, one of the keen ones is how do we change number of progeny that make it clear to harvest, and how do we reduce the number of replacements we need in our system due to increased longevity of cows. Those seem to me to be the two pretty obvious opportunities for us. Okay? It's, again, an optimization exercise, and as we think about that optimization exercise, and I want to tie this, there hasn't been much genetics in here yet, I recognize, okay? Notice at the beginning it was more views from a geneticist, but okay. But I want to stop with this one because we've got two huge sources of genetic opportunity in our business that we need to capture, okay? And I think I say this about in every talk I give. Additive genetic merit and non-additive genetic merit, okay? As we think about improving components across our system, we need to capitalize on all the things that we have heritability estimates for and DNA markers for and selection opportunity. We need to do that, but we also need to use heterosis and crossbreeding, because I think as you look at the traits with low heritabilities, particularly those that address survivability, longevity, and the number of calves we produce, there's a huge opportunity for us to improve output in our system that we've, I think more recently, unfortunately in my opinion, neglected, okay? So it's not we don't have to have additive selection and non-additive selection as independent events. They can be concurrent events, okay? There's no rule that says you can't have crossbred cows and use EPDs simultaneously, okay? That law doesn't exist, okay? So I encourage us to think more holistically as we go about particularly our cow herd design and selection systems to incorporate those concepts and relate it back to this idea of production efficiency, okay? With that, I'm going to stop, be glad to maybe answer a question.